this was back in June, so it's part of it's happening right now. There is this ending and new beginning. Our old earth is sort of phasing out. Anything low vibrational, anything hate, fear, any of those low vibrational feelings, emotions, frequencies are not going to really be able to exist in the new earth. Well, hello, audience. I'm Khaliah Sage, and I am a near-death experiencer and also a spiritualist and healer and wellness coach. So I'm here to share a little bit about my near-death experience and how that changed everything with me. So the details of my NDE. So all of it started for me 10 years ago in January of 2020. I'm sorry, January of 2014, and I was taking a prescribed medication for depression and ended up having a very severe adverse reaction that caused all of my skin and hair and nails to come off. So I essentially developed burns. They looked like burns, like fire burns, but they just came from inside out. So I was put in a medically induced coma because of that for 37 days. So that's where I had a really trippy spiritual experience, but the underlying near-death experience had to do with an adverse reaction that caused burns all over my body, 95% of my body. Immediately, I just saw myself. I saw me laying in the hospital bed. I saw the things going on around me. I sort of stayed close to where my physical body was for a long time, and I say a long time, and time really isn't real in this realm, so I don't really know how much time it was, but it seemed like I was constantly going back to check on my body, so I had this sort of out of body experience where I was able to see the stuff that was happening around me, but then I was able to go back to my past, so I was able to just with a thought stream of consciousness sort of think my way to pretty much anything. But I didn't know that I could do that at first, so it was just sort of happening. But I went back to the past, I saw things in the future. I was able to see things that were happening in my present reality in the real time, but not where I was. Like, I was able to see something that was happening with a family member in a different state. And I think what I think is the most impressive part was seeing God, and it's not what we think. I was after this was sort of the end of the experience, but a lot of things happened prior to this, but this was sort of the pivotal moment for me because after seeing so many different things and experiencing things and not really understanding like what I was supposed to do with all this information, when I'm in this space, this spirit realm, this spirit body, as I call it, I was still myself. I was still very much Khaliah. That's like, what is going on? I want to talk to the manager. This is too much. Like, I don't know what was showing me. And there was like this guy that was with me, but it wasn't like a person or anything that I recognized with my physical eyes, but I like recognized it with my energy, and we were able to like talk and communicate, but it wasn't through like words. It was just sort of through telepathy or just sort of energy ways. I don't know how to explain it, but so I'm telling this guy like I'm done seeing all this stuff. I had to see really horrific things that happened to me in my past and things I didn't quite understand that would have happened in the future, but I didn't understand that at the time. So I'm like, I want to see God. Like I'm done with this. Like take me to God, because I was asking over and over if I was dead, and they kept telling me no, I'm not dead, and I'm not gonna die. I just have to have this experience and stuff. At the end of it, I was just over it. So they're like, okay, you can go and see God. And so I'm fully expecting to see, big white man and a big chair and a big beard and all of that. No, it was literally like there was these stairs that were just like vast, but like I didn't have to walk up them. I just sort of like floated in this sort of misty like way. Um, and you get into this space and it's not like a contained room, but it's big and vast, and there's this mirror that is like so extravagant and like big and huge, and just it had crystals and jewels and just like it was like see-through, but then also in it I could see anything that there was, like anything that I brought to my consciousness, but the thing that brought me to it told me like I can't get too close to it or else I wouldn't be able to come back. And the second that I'm like in the presence of this, I'm just like overwhelmed with the only way I can describe it is just like warm, unconditional love that I've never experienced. Like just the most radiant emotion that I don't think I've ever felt like on earth. But something I kind of always dreamed of, but and I just cried. Like I couldn't even really talk and I didn't have to. It understood my emotions and it's like again, I was expecting to see a person, but it was just this mirror and I got a little bit closer to it and in it I could see myself. I could see anything that I had been through and things that were coming and I could see anything that I brought to my consciousness. So I was asking it a lot of questions and trying, to grasp understanding, why is this happening to me? Why did all these bad things happen to me in the past? And the way that it was explaining things to me was like, it's this source energy is in everything. And my main question was like, where were you when all of this bad stuff was happening to me? And it sort of like showed me through the mirror, like where it was. And like everywhere in our world, in our realm, whatever you want to call it, there's light and darkness, right? So it was showing me everywhere that there was darkness, there was some light that was trying to like contain it. And then obviously I went through a lot of traumatic things, so in it there was like this light that was sort of holding me, like holding my consciousness separate so that I wouldn't actually like absorb, the experience of the trauma. And so it was sort of like showing me how it was there, holding me like separate and like my ancestors were there and like it was just like this full illustration and I understood, but it all like it wasn't enough for me at the same time. Like I got what it was saying, but it was just like, but why did you could have stopped it, like why? And so I was just asking, lots of things, but it was kind of showing me things that were coming to me and like why I couldn't stay because I kept asking, can I please just stay? Like a lot of people don't realize that I was taking the medication, for depression, for suicidal ideations. So I was trying to prevent, taking my own life and ended up almost dying. So I'm asking this thing like, can I just go? Like I don't want to be here anymore and life is too hard and it's like do not done. And I literally tried to just like go towards it anyway, and then I like got zapped into my heart and like swung back into my body, and then I just woke up from there slowly, like over a few days, but I sort of went back into the coma space too, so I was kind of able to go back and forth, and with that, I was able to see angels, I was able to see ancestors that I've never met, I was able to see a lot. And it was more like as if I was in a bus, like driving by something. It was kind of like a quick view, and it was sort of telling me like you don't need to understand all of this. You'll understand later. And I didn't understand this at the time, but later I understood that it was kind of planting seeds that I would then recognize later when I was on my spiritual journey and understanding what truth is, and I was able to kind of like recognize different things. But angels and psychic abilities and healing abilities and all of these things are absolutely real, which I did not believe in any of that at the time that this happened to me. So seeing that I could be in spaces that my physical body was not, to the point that when I woke up from the coma, I was saying things that I could not have known or experienced, because I was clearly in a hospital bed for 5 weeks, but I woke up knowing very specific details about things that happened while I was asleep, and then little did I know I knew things that were happening in the future, so I didn't find that out until 4-ish years later. I started seeing the things come into my physical reality, which was very trippy. The things that I saw that were sort of entities, I saw God, which I saw as source, collective conscious mirror being. And then I also saw angels, but they don't look like what society thinks that they look like. They almost kind of look like transformers. Really big, like giant, and kind of scary looking, but they weren't scary. It like I wasn't physically scared of them, but they don't look like people. They look well, figures and shapes, and they got a whole bunch of eyes, and um, I saw ancestors that I've never met for people, from my family. I didn't identify them as who they were, but I just could feel that they were my family. And then I saw this sort of guide that was with me the whole time. And it wasn't like a human. It was sort of like this light body, is what I called it for a long time. And it was kind of shaped like a person, but it just sort of looked like a big light, like it just like as if you were looking into the sun. And it had a voice, but it wasn't an audible voice. It was like an internal voice that I could just understand, and but it wasn't like male or female. It was just this energy that was sort of guiding me, and at the beginning, it kind of took on a more human form, but then towards the end of my experience, it was just sort of there, and it was sort of communicating with me just telepathically. I didn't see it physically as much, which I then understood that later on that that's sort of like the higher self. So there's like how religion looks at the Trinity of like God, Father, or Father. I'm sorry, Father, Son, Holy Spirit is how religion looks at the energy of God, right? But it's similar because that guide that I saw is basically like the Holy Spirit, what religion would deem some type of Holy Spirit. And then I would be considered like what Jesus is, and then God would be that mirror. So all of those things are connected, and like everything is connected. That's part of the other message too, is like there's no separateness. All of these things are connected to the same thing. All the religions are connected to the same thing. All the languages are all connected to the same thing. And that is what we're like meant to do. We're meant to get back into a more like unified, Pangea type world where we live in unity and collective consciousness because that's how we were meant to live. So that's kind of like where we're going back, but a lot of things kind of have to be destroyed, and religion is one of those things because it has sort of oppressed human consciousness and suppressed the truth and the knowing of things. But that energy is white and collect. That there's this three energy, there's this Trinity energy, but it's us, like we are God. And that was like really, really hard for me to conceptualize and understand and even say out loud and accept, coming from Southern Baptist, that's blasphemy, You don't say that. You don't say Jesus, but we are. Like, Jesus was a real person, but he was sent here to show us what we could do. And what we as humans have the ability when our consciousness is at its highest. So I did notice that after that experience, I started to have more abilities that were kind of flippy, that defied the odds of doctors and science and all of these things. So it sort of sent me in this quest of figuring out, what did all that mean and what did it mean in comparison to what religion tells us. So yeah, it was a lot of unpacking for the last 10 years, to say the least. So did I have any feelings about mankind or the future? Yes, that was one of the things that I saw in the mirror. So I talked about this in a different interview, but this was back in June, so part of it's happening right now. There is this ending and new beginning. Our old Earth is sort of phasing out. Anything low vibrational, anything hate, fear, any of those low vibrational feelings, emotions, frequencies are not going to really be able to exist in the new Earth. And it's not like we're all going to drown and we're all going to burn and we're just going to wait up. It's not that. But it's this, over time, everything that can exist in the new space is going to dissolve. But that is through the form of a lot of natural disasters, a lot of calamity, wars, things like that. But it's happening in different places at the same time. And those of us that are awakened on the frequency that the new earth is already on, like we're fine. There's like opportunities for people to raise their vibration and raise their consciousness. And if they do that, then they can exist in what's coming. But what we knew as society is going on. The capitalistic structure, the patriarchy, all those things are going away. And I do not have a time of when, because that was something that was very clear, is that there's no time on that side. So when you experience something, it's really hard to translate it into physical 3D time. But the things that I was saying are already happening right now in terms of wars and natural disasters that are unusual And it's because our earth is starting to revolt. It's starting to, kind of get back at the things that hurt it. So it's unfortunate that a lot of change and destruction has to happen. But there is hope for unity. And I did see a happy earth where everybody sort of lives in a community, like not like a compound, commune type thing, but just the earth itself was more harmonious and communal, and there was more of a connection, a human connection, versus everybody trying to live their separate, segregated lives. But everything that is on the frequency of hate has to go. Everything that's on the frequency of fear cannot go. So all of those things are being dissolved, which is why people are waking up rapidly. Oh yeah, I mean it started in 2020 and it's slowly been happening little by little because nothing is gonna happen like bam, all at once. It's something that has to happen slowly over time. And yes, I do think that next year we're gonna see a lot more of it, but I do honestly think it's gonna continue past 2025 because it just seemed like a massive change. It seemed like everything has to change, right? So I would compare it to, excuse me, when you move out of a house, you don't move the whole house out, you move it out room by room, right? So that's kind of how this change to the frequency has to go. So it has to start with this area, and kind of work its way around because everything isn't going to get destroyed at once, but everything's going to come back to life at once, if that makes sense. So I do think that is like, so parallel universe or things, there's an alternate universe, that's kind of true, but it's like the past, the present, and the future is all happening at the same time. But there is going to be this split, and there'll be this kind of like an archive, right? So it's not deleted, but it's just not really in use right now. So it's gonna kind of just dissolve to this other kind of archived realm. And everything on that frequency has to stay on that frequency. So do you know how like people talk about the Mandela effect and seeing things shifting, like, you see something all this time and then it shifts. It's kind of like a little bit of that. We'll just, those of us that are awakened to things will notice a shift, we'll notice that things are different. Um, but our minds have to be protected in this shift, right? So it can't be catastrophic to where, people just disappear in front of our eyes. It's not that. But this is why a lot of us are being called to leave certain relationships. We're leaving people, jobs, things that no longer serve us. A lot of people are being called to do that because that stuff has to stay on that lower frequency earth that's going to be dissolved. And so those of the higher frequency earth, the new earth, will exist. Both of them will exist at the same time. It's kind of like a three-layer cake, right? So they're all together, but they're separate. That's why I was talking about healing, right? So the way to purify our energy is to heal our wounds. The way to purify our energy is to raise our consciousness and to raise our vibration. Everything has a vibration. Our emotions, our clothes, our hair, everything. So we get into a higher frequency, we raise that consciousness, we're more awakened, we have pure intentions, we have pure energy. That's the pureness. So it's not necessarily in a behavior or something that you have to take or get this crystal, or it's nothing like that. It's you and your energy and your pure intentions. So those of us that have been operating in love and light, we're really not going to see anything different because we've already been operating in that space. So when you ask, how do we purify our spirit, or what purity things do we do? Live in light, live in love, escape anything fear, escape anything shame, escape anything of hate. That's how you purify. And then in terms of your body, yeah, so we, in the United States, we have really terrible food, really, really terrible food, really terrible medicine, everything is poison. So it's really important to purify your body in terms of detoxing, so doing more whole foods, but it's not necessarily like a specific kind of diet or anything, but it's using things of the earth to purify you. But you don't even necessarily have to do it all the time every day. I mean, you should, but be intentional. When you use something, be intentional about how you're using that energy because your intention and your frequency is everything in this space and in this earth. Um, getting into a space where your body feels safe is also a huge thing because so many of us have experienced so much trauma and we never healed from it. Our society doesn't really support healing from trauma, but that is so necessary in order to raise the frequency of your physical body. So this is why you will notice that when people start to elevate spiritually, sometimes we have body pains and things that are unexplainable because trauma gets stored in your body when you're not dealing with it in your mental space and when you're not dealing with it spiritually. So you have to release all of those things, and that is something you can do, and it's not anything that can be done in one sitting, right? So using the energy around you, using the moon, using the planets, using all of the energy in the universe to support that release also helps. And then spiritually purifying means finding truth and being attuned and aligned with the energy of truth and not hate, not capitalism, not patriarchy, not supremacy, but truth. And it's much like our understanding of truth is kind of like language is. We're all saying the same things, we just say it a little bit differently based on our experience. And that's similar to how we have to sort of approach spirituality. You do what resonates and you take what resonates for you. So what works for me may not necessarily work for you. But I felt very called after this experience to understand my roots, to understand who my ancestors were, and I came to an understanding that when we have certain ancestral ties, those are the spirit guides that we have closest contact to. So you want to get in tune with what your ancestors did, their spiritual practices, in order to be able to connect with them the easiest. So I found that when I connected that way and I started doing what made sense for my ancestral roots, I was getting a lot more downloads and having more spiritual experiences and having more spiritual encounters, and I was resonating with my natural frequency. So that's how the flow state was able to kind of come through. And people talk about that flow state with meditation a lot. And yes, meditation is a great tool to use, but it's not the only tool to help, with your spiritual practice. But what you're trying to do when you're meditating is to get into that flow space. And what that flow space does is kind of allow your brain to disconnect long enough for spirit to be able to kind of come through you and give you those codes or those downloads or those healing things in your body and clear. But all those things can be reached from other things too. So as long as you're getting into that flow space, that's how you're able to receive more clarity about guidance as to what works for you or what doesn't, and get more spirit messages that way. But doing all of those things in conjunction was really what helped me heal what I would say rapidly. And I say rapidly, but it still was 10 years. I had an exuberant amount of childhood trauma, severe, severe, severe abuse. So for me, there was a lot more deeper wounds and things to work through, but it was doing healing on the body level, on the mind level, and then ultimately on the spirit level that enabled me to awaken and have the purest experience. If we heal ourselves and do all these things, can we upgrade our spiritual ability? Yes. And that's also part of the message, was that everybody can do that. You don't have to have a near-death experience in order to have access to those abilities. Now, granted, me having a near-death experience sort of gave me an expedited experience with it, but everybody can have psychic abilities. Everybody can have healing abilities. Everybody has those. They're just sort of suppressed under low vibrational frequencies like shame and fear and trauma. So when we start asking the questions that we're afraid to ask, that's where we start knowing more. When we get in tune with finding who our true self is, that's when we start getting more in tune. So it is figuring out who you are without naming any of your titles. So not who your parents say you are, not what your job says, not what your partner, not even what your kids, but who are you at your core? When you can answer those questions, you are essentially turning to God, because we are all made in God's image. We're all connected to that God source. So when we get connected to self, we're getting connected to God. And through that, we're able to pour out and give, to others and help others heal. But the goal is to heal ourselves first. And this is why you will find a lot of healers, a lot of spiritualists have a lot of trauma that they have to heal themselves from. because we are meant to be the mirrors for people to see how they can heal. And that's sort of why I had to come back. I was so mad about it, but I had to come back, and that was part of my soul agreement to share with people like, hey, you can heal from this, and you can absolutely have a better experience, have a better life, have peace, have joy, have love, have all the things that we're meant to have and experience in this human life, but our consciousness got diluted and just suppressed by all the hate that is in our society. So yes, everybody can do that, and you do not have to have a near-death experience to access it. It just sort of catapults you, slingshots you towards it, but just heal. Just ask those hard questions. Get in function with yourself. Raise your vibration, and you'll awaken. You'll shift over time, and that's the way it's supposed to happen. Anybody that tells you that it's some overnight thing, like an instantaneous thing, is not telling the whole story. Now there are some experiences like that it changes you, like you have a certain knowing about it and your perspective is changed, but in terms of, when I first woke up from the coma, my physical body was very mangled and had to do a lot of healing. So I was not physically strong during the time that I was mentally strong and spiritually strongest. And it's almost like I kind of flip-flopped so that I could grow in those, areas one at a time, because I think trying to do it all at once would have been too much. But everybody needs to go through that process of doing their shadow work and finding out what they're scared of, because anything that we're holding on to that's fear-based, that's what has to go. That's what needs to be dealt with. That is what is lowering our frequency the most. And unfortunately, the most popular religion in the United States is the most fear-based religion. And so that is why a lot of people within that community experience a lot of anxiety, a lot of trauma, a lot of fears, a lot of pain, because their mindset is that they're sinners and they're born sin, and they just have to act, work and work and work and work, and that's fear. That's all coercion and fear to hold and bind our minds together to make us stay in that low frequency. And the second that you start asking questions in that community is when you're told that that's doubting God, and but all of that keeps you in that loop of fear and shame and guilt. And those are the lowest frequencies in our realm. So by addressing those fears, and that shame and that guilt is gonna really turn things around for a lot of people spiritually, and in their minds, and in their bodies, because all of those things are also connected. Well, all kind of that cake metaphor that I gave earlier. And by healing all three of those levels, that's the way to do it. Know that we all have the ability to heal ourselves. We all have the ability to have psychic experiences. Spiritual abilities are real. Beings outside of our society are real. But we don't need to feel all of those things. We can embrace them, we can accept them, and learn without being fearful. And I think the biggest thing that people need to hear is that we don't need all of these external things to heal ourselves. And that does not mean that I'm spreading a message of, we don't need medical care and all this. That's not what I'm saying. There's definitely a time and place for all of those things, but do we need the US, pharmaceutical protocol to heal diabetes? No. There's a lot of things that are illnesses that we can heal by healing our minds and healing our spirit, and healing the body will heal after that. A lot of these physical illnesses are manifestations of mental and spiritual problems that we are not dealing with, so they had to dig deeper for us to notice them. But we all have these abilities to do it. We just have to wake up. We have to actually take care of ourselves. We have to actually give love to ourselves and actually give compassion to other people. And when you do that, you reflect that. And then you get that in return. So it just takes work, and it's not a quick fix, but it's worth it. It is absolutely worth it. And who I am in my healing journey today, I would not have done any a different. I would go through it all again, because I needed to see everything that I saw. I needed to unlearn everything. And by unlearning anything that makes us feel fear, we are absolutely seeking truth in those moments. So seek truth, heal your inner child, heal your body, mind, and spirit, all three levels, and you will have an amazing spiritual awakening that will absolutely catapult you to truth. Yes, so thank you guys so much. It's been such a pleasure sharing my story with you. If you're interested in reaching out to me, you can find me on TikTok, you can find me on Instagram, and you can find me on YouTube, although I don't have a ton of videos posted, but all of it is the Khaliah Sage, all one word, one handle, same name on all platforms. I am open to do readings and healing sessions, and I'm here, so reach out. I would love to hear you guys' stories. I would love to connect, and I'm eager to share my story more. I know that it's meant to be shared in a huge way that is meant to change the world. So I am here, I am open, and I am available for love and light opportunities. So it's it.